Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Indianapolis, where we connect and create community.
Wahoo!
Woo! So when you get excited, just jazz hands, and then I can register that. Like, good, good.
Now, Michael, you know that's how you applaud in sign language, right? You know that.
Oh, awesome.
So if you're because deaf people, if you know sign language, deaf people, they don't hear you. So that's applause.
I like that. Excellent. Well, I'm going to be going. I said excellent, and that smart speaker heard me, and she started talking. So I have to be careful what I say around her. All right. So let's get this meeting started. I'd like to hand the floor over to Alice for our moment of reflection and pledge.
Well, hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Am I not unmuted? Okay. It's good to see all of you. Welcome to my kitchen. Welcome to my kitchen.
What's for lunch?
Yeah, you're welcome, Judge. You're welcome. Our current health and economic crises require us to be locked down and constrain ourselves from helping others in need. Well, as Rotarians, that's hard because we're people of action who serve others. We've heard it said several ways lately that staying at home is an act of service. So thanks for doing that today and so many other things. We're not only hunkering down for the common good, we're hankering to help. For now, most of us must trust our instincts to have our outlets that are virtual. And in Indianapolis, we have several opportunities. You can donate to the funds set up for the common good of our healthcare heroes and their families at all the local hospitals. You can volunteer online to mentor homeless children whose only positive daily routine was going to public school and being fed there. You can pick up groceries and medicines for people who don't want to get out, particularly the elderly. And you can make calls to shut-ins, friends who are sick, and families who have lost loved ones to COVID-19. I read a guy the other day, John Bridgeland, CEO of Civic, a bipartisan ideas company, and he asks a question, a big question. He says, for us is to know a big question is for us to think about what kind of country will emerge from this opportunity for a reset. Will we learn to trust one another again, to listen to those with different views a little more, to reach out more strongly to the vulnerable, to work together to solve our big social and economic challenges? Well, it's too early to say what the answers to those will be. I did find a bit of comfort from a young woman, a young mother and writer named Laura Kelly Fanucci, who's a blogger and a columnist for a publishing syndicate that has some things for us to reflect on. Her poem is entitled, When This Is Over. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with the neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Thursday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, that we hoped to be. And may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. Now, if you would like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I think we'll be muted except for me, so I'll lead us. Please join if you like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alice. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to Sam Lesturgeon to recognize our visiting Rotarians and guests.
Thank you, President Michael. If any Rotarians have invited guests, I would ask you to introduce your guest at this time. Any Rotarian guest? 3, 2, 1. Okay, how about any visiting Rotarians today?
Well, I guess I would love to jump in. I'm not a Rotarian, I am the guest, but I have invited quite a few friends to be here, and I'm really grateful that they showed up. So maybe I'll give them a shout right now.
Thank you.
I spoke with Rebecca, but I think, Rebecca, you actually are a member of this group, Rebecca Ellis. Jessica Bowles is here. Thanks for being here. Alex Rafado Perry, she's here as well. Thanks for being here. I'm just kind of going through the list of everybody else who's here. Oh, Megan, my colleague, and John Mark, my other colleague, is here as well. I sent a message to Kyle Defer about this as well. And yeah, my partner, Dee Peters, is also here too.
Garrett,
Wonderful.
can you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, my name's Garrett Mintz, and I'm from Bloomington. I'm your guest speaker today.
There you go. Thank you, Garrett. We look forward to it. Thanks for bringing all your guests. Let's see. Well, Garrett and guest, you know, this is the part of what I call the miracle of Rotary. So if we're not in person, we're online, and glad you could join us. President Michael, back to you.
Well done, Sam. I like how you threw that back to me. Very, very professional. And we will have a formal introduction of our guest speaker later on by Donna. But thank you, Garrett, for giving us that primer. So I appreciate that. You know, as we look at the mosaic and see faces that we don't recognize, like, you know, Matt Will, it gives us a chance to just kind of connect with one another. All right, so I'm flipping back and forth between the screen and my notes. So with that, hey, Matt, guess what? You're next. Talk about civic entrepreneurship grants.
Yes, first of all, I have to, you know, I changed my background because in honor of last night's premiere of Bachelor, Listen to Your Heart, we got the mansion behind us. So, you know, for those of you that are big Bachelor fans, you know, it was a very interesting debut of the new show. So just if you should recognize that. If you don't recognize that, I don't know where your life has been. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm here to let everybody know that we have civic entrepreneurship grants that are available. My goal, and Garrett, this is for you and your guests especially, this is an incentive. I would like to pay you to join Rotary. I want to give you $1,000 each. And all you have to do is become a member and apply for a grant. We have money. In fact, we have $9,000 that we'd like to give out by June 30th. That's right. We have $9,000 left, and we'd like to give it out in $1,000 increments. All you have to do is be a member and do a service project. We will pay the expenses for your service project. Now, keep in mind, this isn't just a grant. We don't just give a check to an organization. We give, you know, a ton of money, well over $120,000 to local organizations for that kind of stuff, about $100,000 actually. But this is specifically to cover the expenses if you go out and do something. So let's say you pack lunches at Gleaners and it costs money to buy the food. We will pay for the food for that. We've had members take students to the symphony, and so we covered the expense of the tickets for the students to go to the symphony. Marie Koning is infamous for planting everything that you see in Indianapolis. She probably planted it along with her friends. And so we, of course, paid the expenses for that. It's pretty quick turnaround unless the members of the committee don't respond quickly. So if you're a member of the Civic Entrepreneurship Committee and you're on here and you haven't replied to my email I sent 3 days ago, shame on you. So please respond to that because we have a request that's currently outstanding. So please, I beg all of you guests, let me give you $1,000. So you can just go to our website, you can get the application. We don't want more than 2 pages. If you want to write a lot, don't apply. We want people that write very little and just want money. So that's who we're looking for. Back to you, President Michael.
Well done, Matt. And I tell you what, I'm in sales and I'll sweeten that deal a little bit. If you join now, you won't have to pay for April. How about that?
Ooh.
April's on me. And it doesn't stop there. You join now, not only will you not have to pay for April, we won't even charge initiation fee. How about that, Garrett? No pressure. You just have the length of this call to think about it. After that, the deal is off the table.
That sounds good. There's a lot of pressure, Michael.
All right. So for next week's program, please join us for the Environment and Beautification Committee's Arbor Day program. We're still pushing forward. We will have Jesse Carbanda with us, the Executive Director of the Hoosier Environmental Council. The Hoosier Environmental Council is Indiana's largest environmental policy organization. Jesse oversees HEC's strategic and program development, legislative initiative, operations, and fundraising. And Jesse will discuss 5 areas where Indiana can make major environmental progress. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week right here on Zoom. Jeff, it looks like you're on the set of The Shining. Is that the old one or the new one?
That is the old one, and I'm impressed that you recognize that.
Awesome. Okay, so with that, I'm going to throw it over to you, Donna, to formally introduce our guest. I'm sorry, our newest member, Garrett.
No pressure there, Garrett. Okay, mentors aren't people who tell us what you need to do or that you need to be like a mini-me. I like to think of them as fairy godparents. You see, fairy godparents take up the mission to watch over someone in need. I'm sure we can all think of times when we've needed fairy godparents, and given today's crisis, it could be today or tomorrow for some of us. I know I needed fairy godparents when I was young and starting out my career. My high school counselor wouldn't even talk to me about college. You see, I was from a farm family, and farm families back then just didn't even think about college and didn't go to college. So I'm proud to say that I was the first in our family to graduate from college, and I had a lot of help along the way. First, it was my political science professor, Jim Riggs, from the University of Indianapolis, telling me I should apply for a public relations intern in the office of Governor Orr. Mark Lubbers, the press secretary, found me reliable, and a 2-month gig ended up to be 3 years I spent there. He gave me the opportunity to work in a professional office setting and learn the tricks of the trade. Tricks I still rely on to this day and help pave my way to the future. Then there was Guy Johnson, another professor and press secretary to the lieutenant governor. He told me my writing ability was outstanding, and that's all I needed to add journalism to my political science degree. I've been a writer ever since that one comment, a comment that changed my life. You see, one simple comment can change a way we look at things, or it can even change your life. And you, my fellow Rotarians, have that ability to do the same. Rotary provides that opportunity to change a life, and please never take that for granted. It's really all about connecting with people, isn't it? And it's hard today to do that with our social distancing, to have that human contact that we all crave and that we all need. Well, today's guest speaker, Garrett Mintz, the founder of Ambition in Motion. Garrett helps companies break through employee communication barriers through horizontal mentorship. He challenges the traditional vertical mentoring relationship to increase the likelihood of mentor relationships lasting longer and being more effective. Garrett also facilitates executive horizontal mentorship, where he connects executives together for one-on-one mentoring relationships, where they can strategize and relate to each other in ways that other people on their team might not be able to. So now it's my privilege to introduce you to Garrett Mintz.
Donna, that was an awesome introduction. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I really appreciate that. I love the analogy to fairy godparents. I really appreciate that. The topic of this presentation today is keeping company culture engaged while they're working remotely. And my background, as Donna has alluded to, is through mentoring relationships. Now, one thing that I think is probably important to do is share a little bit of my background into why I'm so passionate about mentorship and why I love mentoring relationships. And just to give some insight into that, I personally needed mentors. And when I say that, what do I mean? I mean, from age 15 to age 19, I was a drug dealer. And at the end of my freshman year at Indiana University, I got arrested in an undercover operation by the Indiana University Police Department, and I received 5 felony distribution charges, and I was expelled from school. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I mean, my life just got hit by a brick wall. And I mean, up to that point in time in life, I thought success was you go to school, you get good grades, you get a job, and you just kind of figure your life out from there. And I was faced with a situation where I was looking at prison. Literally, I was looking at prison, and I had no idea what my next step in life would be. But I got really lucky. I got really lucky. After that freshman year, shortly thereafter, I ended up getting enrolled in a program in St. George, Utah called At the Crossroads, which exposed me to the power of mentoring relationships, both personally and professionally. Personally, in my mind, I thought I would never get caught, and I thought if I did get caught, no one would care. And I was wrong on both counts. And that's something that mentors really helped me kind of see and realize. I thought I was just like Superman. And on a professional side, I got an opportunity. About a month and a half after living in Utah, I flew back to Chicago. That's where my family's from, for the weekend, to let them know my life's getting on track. On that flight, at that time in my life, I was reading a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I don't know if you all have read that book. It's an awesome book. It really had an impact on my life. And one of the things Dale talks about is that people love to talk about themselves. I mean, shoot, look at me right now. People love to talk about themselves. And one of the things he says is ask people questions because they're much more interested in themselves than they are in you. And I'm like, okay, screw it. I'll give this a shot. So I'm on this flight, sitting next to a guy, so I'm going to apply it. Sit next to this guy, ask him questions all about him. And, you know, he's like, oh man, you're such a great conversationalist. I'm like, I don't think I actually said 2 words about me, but it didn't really matter because by the time the plane landed, he said, by the way, I'm the director of ground equipment for SkyWest Airlines. What would you think about coming into our ground equipment department and being a financial analysis intern in our ground equipment department? Just internship offer right on the spot. Had no idea that I might be going to prison within the next year. Had no idea about my background. He just takes me under his wing and gives me a shot, is a mentor to me. And that was really awesome. And I was really lucky, but I'm in this program with these other young men and women who are not so lucky. They are being systematically denied from opportunities because they had to check a box that said, I've been convicted of a crime. And so what I did was I went to these business owners and I asked them, I said, don't give this young man, this young woman a job, but be a mentor to him or her. And it was like light bulbs. All of them said yes. So many of them said yes. And it was amazing. It was extremely rewarding. And I fell in love with that. And I said, you know what, shoot, if I could figure out some way to make money facilitating these types of relationships where people can learn from each other, that is what I want to do. That wasn't so easy, but I got really lucky. Shortly thereafter, about a year after living in Utah, the court system ended up seeing what I was doing. They ended up dropping my felonies to a misdemeanor conviction. Indiana University ended up re-enrolling me. I got a second chance. I'm extremely lucky and grateful for that. And that's when I started Ambition in Motion. And Ambition in Motion's initial idea was connecting college students with alumni for mentoring relationships. Here's one thing I learned about higher ed. It can be difficult to get a deal done. And so this may sound crazy, but what I ended up doing was I ended up giving away the program for free. And I didn't make any money, but I got onto a little over 300 campuses and facilitated thousands of mentoring relationships. So I wasn't making much money, but I was learning a ton. And here's what I learned. What I learned was that traditional vertical mentoring relationships, so when 2 people are matched together based on strictly years of experience, area of expertise, status in a company, or even if you're an executive and you think, oh man, my focus is on just some transactional outcome like raising money or getting more sales or manage my team better, if it's strictly focused on some, I guess, tangible outcome, we realized that that transactional notion was inhibiting these relationships. And then we learned that only 18% of those relationships lasted for 6 months and were considered productive and quality by both participants. And I was shocked by this because every mentor program that I'd ever discovered was like this. I figured, why reinvent the wheel if the wheel's already been created? But there was clearly a problem. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up partnering with some industrial and organizational psychologists. And we ended up trying a bunch of different personality assessments. We ended up trying things like Myers-Briggs, Culture Index, Predictive Index, DISC, StrengthsFinder, a bunch of academically proven assessments that had not been tried commercially. And because we had thousands of students and alumni mentee-mentor relationships to facilitate, we had a huge test sample of people to try this on. And some of them worked, some of them didn't work so much, but the one that we found to be the most effective is this thing called work orientation. So I'll just screen share my screen and show you a little bit about work orientation and how that impacts mentoring relationships and how it can tie back to keeping company cultures engaged and yeah, keeping people engaged while they're working remotely. So I'm going to share my screen. Alrighty, hopefully you all can see my screen. Perfect. So work orientation is how you view your work. Some people view their work as a job, some people view their work as a career, some people view their work as a calling. Now, this is fluid. It can change throughout your life. So you could be job-oriented at one point in time in life and then become career-oriented. It can impact, the personal things in your life can impact your work orientation. And there's not a right or wrong work orientation. So our research has indicated that you can be just as engaged at your work if you're job-oriented as well as if you're calling-oriented or career-oriented. There's not a right or wrong work orientation. But what we learned was that when two people's work orientation is aligned for a mentoring relationship, the likelihood that relationship lasts for 6 months and is considered productive and quality goes from 18% to 72%. Big jump. And so when we learned that, we realized, like, whoa, we can do something here. We can facilitate horizontal mentoring relationships. And so that kind of leads to the premise of this presentation, this conversation about keeping culture while employees work remotely. So I've kind of provided the background information on that. I want to, I guess, share an importance of being a really strong leader in this period in time that we're in right now. A few years ago, I read a book called Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. It's an awesome book. Simon Sinek's an incredible author. And one of the things Simon talks about is how leadership impacts the loyalty and the way the people that we work with respond to us. Now, he compared Jack Welch's management style to Jeff Senegal's management style. Now, Jack Welch was the CEO of GE. Jeff Senegal is the manager or the CEO of Costco. Jack Welch's management style is every year cut the bottom 10% of income earners every single year. Essentially, he just would, if you were the bottom 10%, you were cut. You would get fired from GE. And Simon Sinek's argument was that this was not conducive for building a healthy company culture. It created people stabbing each other in the back, trying to not be in that bottom 10%. And now I know looking at stock price isn't the only measure of success of a company, but I think it's interesting to kind of see the volatility of when the 2008-2009 financial crisis had happened, how GE was affected compared to Costco, who during that time period gave people raises because Jeff believed that people needed him more now than ever. And so you can see that their curve is a whole lot flatter. They did obviously go down in the recession of 2008, 2009, but not nearly as extensively as Costco. And so I think that really applies to where we're at right now in terms of our situation and status, because I think as leaders, we might be thinking like, shoot, we need to be cutting what's going on, or we need to, do what we can to survive. And I think that's okay. But I will say people will remember, if you furlough your employees and you bring them back, like if you expect them to have as much loyalty to you as they were before this crisis, you might be into a rude awakening. I mean, essentially, and by the way, I recognize not every company's in a great situation. You may have to do what you can to keep your doors open, and that's okay. But what we've observed from, a company culture where people potentially get cut when things are difficult, it is difficult to rebound from something like that. Whereas if you look at someone like Costco, they were able to keep investing in their people because, I would care to argue your people are your greatest asset. They are your greatest resource. And so essentially Costco has created a safe culture that's critical to their operational success. So when unpredictable scenarios strike, are you investing in your people and building a circle of trust? Or are you doing nothing? Or are you cutting them? I mean, what are you doing as a leader? And I think that's something that's just an important question that I wanted to pose to everybody, because I know this is a difficult time, but it's something to think about, because your people are thinking about this. Your people are thinking like, is this company going to invest in me? Or am I going to have to look for a new job? Am I going to have to fend for myself? And that's something that's, it's definitely a difficult conversation that a lot of employees have with themselves right now. So here's one thing that we observed. Before all this coronavirus stuff hit, one thing we ended up learning from our research working with companies matching people together for mentoring relationships was that 68% of engaged employees that don't work remotely, but especially when they do work remotely, believe that there are communication barriers between them and other employees. And when I say communication barriers, I'm not just saying that one person has a grudge against somebody else or someone's passive aggressive towards somebody else. I literally mean that John in accounting has no idea what Jane in sales does, and vice versa. And that lack of understanding of what people do creates assumptions about their work. And then what those assumptions do, it creates a lack of empathy for their work. And that is how a lot of disengagement can occur in the workplace. And so by breaking down these communication barriers and breaking through these communication barriers, people can be more engaged at work and enjoy their jobs more. So reframing this point, people don't know what their counterparts do in other departments. And when they do work with each other, when they do see what they're doing, and they're not talking about strictly work-related content, it's typically about something superficial like sports, weather, fashion, family. These conversations don't build depth. And I'm here to argue that horizontal mentorship helps build that depth. So as more people begin to work remotely, communication barriers will deepen and employee interaction will decline. They're just not going to see each other more often. They're just not going to have these conversations. All the conversations are going to become work-related. It's going to say, hey, I needed you to get this thing done so then I can get this thing done. And the conversations between each other, that empathy between each other, will start to minimize the more we work remotely, unless we have conversations where we can learn about the obstacles that other people are facing, unless we learn about and begin to empathize with the other things that other people are doing. And I want to be very clear. Your company culture is predicated on people's identity, emotional identity, being with their company. When you hear people say things like you and me and they and I versus we and us and our, they are much more likely, that's a relatively telling point that people are starting to distance themselves from the company culture. And that's just one point. I just know that language creates meaning and language is so critical to that. But when people feel like their emotional identity is with their company, that is a critical component to building this culture and having a strong company culture. And by the way, you might think, well, Costco and GE, they're massive companies. This may not relate to me. I've got a small business of 5 people. I think even if you're a small business of 2 people or 2,000 people, I don't think it matters. I think building a strong company culture and making sure that there's connectivity there is so critical. And so that's where we've discovered horizontal mentorship to be a great solution to keeping remote employees engaged with the company. So one way to keep that is to deliberately set time aside for employees to have intentional conversations with each other. And by intentional conversations, I don't mean that they're all strictly about work, but I also mean that they're not just about sports. It just means that they're able to learn about the obstacles that are being faced by each other. So maybe you've got some employees that are working from home. They've got kids that they have to manage, or they've got a dog, or they've got other responsibilities that they now have to balance on their plate. If you've got another employee that's got none of that, he might be thinking, shoot, Jane is taking forever to send me these reports. I can't do my job right now. What's going on with Jane? And he might start thinking to himself like that he's not getting paid enough because he's doing all this extra work and that he's not seeing anything from Jane. But maybe he doesn't realize that Jane has got 3 kids at home that she's now got to teach, homeschool, do her work, and take care of her entire family. This other person who's got none of those responsibilities may not fully understand that. So these types of horizontal mentoring relationships can build empathy between each other. And they are also free from the workplace hierarchy. And I think I really want to stress that point really strongly, because what happens in the workplace mentorship, sometimes we'll see this, especially from more experienced and more executive people, is they'll say something like, I'm more than happy to be a mentor, but I'm not interested in actually getting a mentor myself. That is the ultimate crux of mentoring relationships. And here's why. When you say things, I'm happy to be a mentor, but I'm not open to getting a mentor, it conveys that you're more than happy to spew advice, but you're not here to listen or ask questions. And that is not conducive for successful mentoring relationships. Horizontal mentor relationships just mean that there are two people interested in learning from each other and giving to the relationship, regardless of their status, their age, their years of experience, that they're open-minded to learning from somebody else. So it doesn't necessarily mean two people on the same level. It could also mean just two people who have a shared work orientation, and they care about learning from each other and giving to this relationship, because the best mentoring relationships are mutual, where both people are giving and taking from the relationship, not one-sided. And these relationships create empathy. And that is huge, because that essentially allows people to understand what other people are going through and help them build a more, just, I guess, unified culture. And these relationships break through communication barriers between employees. And they stop people formulating assumptions about what other people do. They understand that. And I'll share some stories about that towards the end of this, but I just want to convey that really important point. And these relationships build a greater sense of identity employees have with the company, because there's this chemical in our brain called oxytocin. When we are with other people we enjoy being around, it makes us feel better about ourselves. And so when we are around someone we really enjoy being around, oxytocin fires. These horizontal mentoring relationships can help people build oxytocin with each other, which essentially helps them build a greater sense of identity with that organization or entity, that being your company. So how does it work? I'm a big proponent of creating monthly meeting agendas. I don't like the idea of mentor meetings where two people are paired together and you say, here you go, you're free now, like figure it out. Because ultimately we know that the relationship, the conversation is going to be about sports or weather or fashion, and it's not going to be intentional. It's not going to be around the topics that we want them to do in terms of building and understanding obstacles from each other. So to put it another way, for introverts, it helps give them the confidence to understand and the confidence to feel like, okay, we know what we're going to talk about, that this is not going to be a big waste of time. And for extroverts, it keeps them on target. It keeps them on task. So that's pretty critical. The other big thing I'm a big fan of is collecting feedback after every meeting, because I know that not everybody, not everybody, knows exactly what's going on after every meeting. But I do want to acknowledge the difference between quarterly feedback, where you can meet in person with somebody to learn the feedback, versus essentially after every meeting, because quarterly feedback can help you learn the more in-depth information about what's going on. So to give an example, one mentor relationship I facilitated was between two women, Sophia and Lori. Sophia's 28. She's a developer, so she's a computer coder. Lori's 48. She's a VP of customer success. They didn't interact with each other that often before they were paired together for mentorship. But after they were paired together for mentorship, after the second month of meeting, Sophia, in her feedback, on her feedback form, her survey just said 5 out of 5 stars and just said this meeting was great. But what in reality happened is they ended up creating a women's empowerment group. They just decided this was something that didn't exist at the company. They said, we need to have this. And so they did it on their own. And I would have never known that unless I had gotten that quarterly feedback. So if you're thinking about setting up a horizontal mentor program for your own company, I really strongly encourage you to learn those stories and do quarterly feedback collection, to meet with them, to hear what they have to say. And then the last thing is monthly lunch and learns, which are just monthly meetings to teach things about mentoring relationships that help people consistently build these bonds and rapport. The goal is that it's not just a wishy-washy, why are we doing this mentor program? It's about actually making change and driving productivity in the business. So, I think we've all heard about engagement and its correlation to productivity at work. But the issue with engagement is that engagement tells you where your people are at now, not necessarily where they will be, not necessarily where engagement will be. And so I believe that measuring communication barriers and dysfunctional turnover is a better metric is a leading indicator of where engagement will be. And so by communication barriers, I'm just looking to know, do your employees know the obstacles faced by other employees at work? Like, if they don't, if they're making assumptions about other people's work, there's a decently high likelihood that something could happen. They could become frustrated. Those assumptions could lead to a lack of empathy and they become disengaged. The other big thing is dysfunctional turnover. So dysfunctional turnover is when a great employee leaves. This isn't because somebody got fired. This isn't because somebody's spouse ended up getting a job in a different city, so they left. This wasn't because they got an offer at a different company that paid them more money. This is because here's a great employee, but because of their relationship with the supervisor or their coworkers, they ended up leaving. And so what we're measuring are things like, do you feel like your coworkers respect your work? Do you feel like your supervisor respects your work? Do you feel like you've got a good relationship with your supervisor? These are indicators that can essentially lead to whether or not someone may end up leaving. And so I think that if you can measure that and correlate your horizontal mentor program to these outcomes, you can start to see how your business is being positively impacted from mentorship. Typically the time commitment is 1 to 2 hours a month, so it doesn't have to be crazy. And yeah, here's a case study of Jim and Luke. So we matched Jim and Luke together. Jim's 56. He's the director of training and development. Luke's 33. He works in accounting. Their shared work orientation is firmly career oriented with a lean towards calling. Prior to the mentorship, Jim openly complained about Luke. He would get these emails from Luke saying, hey, you didn't do your expense report right. And Jim would get frustrated, and Jim would go to other people in his department, go outside of his department, and he'd complain about it. He'd kind of bait people into it, say, hey, you got any of these stupid emails from Luke? And, eventually he'd get someone to say yes, and then, he'd have a whole conversation about it. And not only was this unproductive, but it was creating friction in the workplace. Now, we know that Luke didn't know about this frustration because both of their engagement scores were pretty high. But I mean, shoot, had Luke been walking down the hallway one day while Jim's talking negatively about him at the coffee station, how does that make Luke feel? Not great. But this type of stuff happens all the time. These little subtle frustrations happen all the time. But when people can connect for horizontal mentoring relationships, they can recognize how much more similar they are than different. It creates a bridge between each other and allows them to empathize with each other. And so for Jim, he ended up realizing the kind of pressure Luke's under. He realized that 15 minutes of redoing the expense reports paled in comparison to Luke not doing his job right. Because if Luke doesn't do his job right, the IRS could come down and do a massive audit, halting business for 2 weeks. That would not be great. On the flip side, Jim ended up giving Luke some feedback and sharing with him how he could minimize that time to redo those expense report emails that would essentially take him down from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. So the point I'm making is that horizontal can help drive operational efficiencies and help people empathize with other people's work and help them understand what other people are going through. So even if you're a business leader and you're thinking to yourself like, okay, a horizontal mentorship program, I don't know if we could do that right away. I think something small that you could take away from this is encouraging your employees to ask each other, what are the biggest obstacles you face with your people? What is the biggest obstacle you face with your work on a daily basis? If you can encourage your employees to ask other employees these questions and to understand and truly take the time to listen, you can really do a lot towards building a culture of empathy and keeping your culture engaged in your company, especially as they're working remotely, especially as they're facing typically unforeseen obstacles that didn't previously exist when they weren't working remotely. So thank you all for your time today. I'd love to open up for Q&A.
All right, so I don't know if there's a raise your hand feature, but unmute yourself if you have a question and just be careful not to step on one another.
Garrett, thank you for being with us. This is Jeff Lake. And the question I had is, we have a mentor program within Rotary. And would you have any suggestions, because we're not really a corporation per se, we're a not-for-profit service organization, as to how we should match up a new member and a mentor?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question, Jeff. What I would say is, I would be more than happy to discuss this after this, but yeah, I know, at least in terms of our research on work orientation, aligning that is critical. Now, you may assume, well, hey, everybody in Rotary is pretty calling oriented. We all want to make an impact, but you don't want to have that assumption because that may not be the case. Some people are in Rotary because their big focus, at least when it comes to their work, is work-life balance. Some people are motivated by professional growth. Just assuming that everybody's calling oriented, I would say is ill-advised because that's not necessarily the case. I know for our executive horizontal mentoring program where we match CEOs, COOs, executive business owners, VPs for companies together for mentoring relationships, that was a common assumption as well, but that was wrong. We've got some CEOs whose their focus is on work-life balance. We've got some CEOs whose focus is on professional growth. We've got some CEOs whose focus is on being a calling and having the personal and professional mission being in alignment. But yeah, I definitely would say that eradicating assumptions about how people view their work based on their participation in Rotary is probably a good idea. But anyways, yeah, I think matching people together based on their shared work orientation is good, but then also providing agendas. I think really agendas keep people on task and allow you to know exactly what they're discussing and just provides them with a guideline of of what to discuss. I know that just chatting with introverted people and extroverted people, it is extremely helpful. For extroverts, it keeps them focused. And for introverted people, it gives them the confidence, because a lot of introverted people, when they're going to a mentor meeting, when they've never met anybody before, or this is one of the first couple of meetings, it could be nervous. It can be given anxiety. This allows them to feel comfortable and confident to know, okay, I know what we're going to talk about. I know we're going to discuss these things. This makes me feel comfortable to enter this conversation.
And when you become a new member, you'll be able to experience this.
Yes, yeah. Well, we can discuss that later as well.
Alice, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Appreciated the information, Garrett. There was a screen, a slide that you used. In the middle was lunch and learn, and the right side was the quarterly feedback.
Yeah, sure.
The lunch, and then you showed the agendas, which I think is a great idea. What's the lunch and learn part? Is that just the actual time, you know, one on each other, one-on-one, and what?
Great question. No, lunch and learn. Sorry, I'm pulling this up. Lunch and learn is on YouTube Live. So I apologize if I was really quick on that, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Alice. So essentially, what I will do is either just myself or myself and a guest will have a conversation about a mentoring topic every single month to help people build a deeper relationship. So we've discussed things about building vulnerability into a mentoring relationship. I mean, we know that vulnerability is the key to building trust in any mentoring relationship. And so we had one workshop on that. We had a guest, this person right here, Thaddeus Rex. He was a guest for our February workshop, and we discussed things like identifying blind spots in a mentoring relationship. And so he helped share his expertise on how you can communicate blind spots to your mentor without offending them, but also being open to learning your own blind spots. This past March, we had one on body language and are you giving or taking energy from this mentoring relationship? And in April, we've got another one on unconscious bias and minimizing unconscious bias that we may have about our mentor. So minimizing any potential biases we may have about somebody because of their race, age, gender, what they're doing for their work, or how we may assume one thing about their work or another. How can we eradicate those assumptions so that we can just meet people and work with them at face value? And so we're bringing in a guest speaker for that workshop as well. But the lunch and learn just teach different topics relevant to mentoring relationships, so then we can help them, be their best selves.
Okay, so do you have, now that's all, those are all proprietary YouTubes, right?
I'd make them public. I mean, I put it out.
I'm interested. Mentoring's always been an interesting topic to me, and I've learned from it. You know, I've learned from many, and I like to share that. But those are good topics. Just even the titles of the topics would help me. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. If you want to check them out, I think for me, I'm a big believer in putting content out there. And so if there's anything you want, almost pretty much all of our videos are public, meaning that you can look at them, you could watch them, you could look at the questions I asked, you could look at the insight I provide. If anything sparks any ideas, go for it, take it. I mean, I think ultimately my vision is a world where the vast majority of people, not a couple people, but the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. If what you're doing, if anything I did help inspire you to do anything that helps lead to this mission, I'm happy. I mean, that's ultimately where I'm going with this. It's about having people be excited about their work. That's something I'm passionate about.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right, Tom.
Hey, Garrett.
So Norm, you got a question? I think Tom has a question, but you were still on mute. Go ahead, Norm.
My experience with mentoring has been that it's voluntary, it's based on kindness, it's helpful, and it almost sounds as though you're talking about something completely different, where companies assign two antagonists to work together. Now, maybe I misunderstood that, and I can see the value in it, but did I get that right?
No, you did not. In brief, I'll clarify. So one, whenever we work with any company and we ask people to participate in this, it's on their own voluntary. I mean, at the end of the day, the mentor program can't exist if people are forced to be in it. It just doesn't work. It won't work. I mean, at the end of the day, it can't work if people don't want to be there. So anybody who's there participating is volunteering and saying, hey, I want to be a part of a mentoring relationship. I'm here to learn, but I'm also here to give to this mentoring relationship. And that is the clear expectation we set from the very beginning of that relationship. And then based on those people that have said, hey, I'm interested in participating in this, we'll then match them together and help connect them. But I think what I always want to make very clear is that people are participating because this is what they want to do. I know with one of the companies we're working with, they did a survey just because they had no idea what other people feel about mentorship. And they've got about 100 people. They ended up having 52 get back to them saying, hey, I want to participate in a mentor program. So over half of their people got back to them and said, I'm interested in a mentoring relationship, both to learn and to give in a mentoring relationship. And so it was awesome to see that, because it was really great to just see how open-minded their people were to, participating in something like this. Cool.
Hey, this is Jeff Crane. Thanks for sharing today, Garrett. What advice would you give somebody who is a part of a group that wants to start a mentoring program from scratch? I mean, we've got an organization that I'm a part of. It's our church, actually, and there's a significant amount of older members and a significant amount of younger members. We think that it's ripe for mentoring. We've got this kind of donut thing going on, and some people would see that as a weakness when you have so many older members, but I think it could be a real asset. I'm just curious how to get it off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think the keys for starting that are being intentional about how you match people. So I'm a big fan of work orientation. If you want to chat with me about work orientation, I'd be happy to do that after like this meeting. So intentional about how you match people. Agendas. I know it's a decent bit of work, but providing meeting agendas is so critical, because if you can match people and then provide them with agendas, you can really set them up for success. You do not want to say like, you're free now, here, like go and meet with each other. That is not a great way, because the conversation can go off in any direction and you don't really have control over that. The next thing is having some form of gathering feedback. If you've got somebody who's technical and they can build out some survey forms that can be automatically sent out every month to gather feedback from people and how their mentor meetings went, I think that's really critical. But I also think it's also important that you do those personal one-on-one meetings where you ask people, like, what did you really enjoy about this experience? What did you not enjoy? Because ultimately it's an iterative process, and learning about what they did enjoy, what they didn't enjoy, so then you can make it better for the future is critical. But just setting up, saying like, hey, we're doing a mentor program, and just like pairing people just because they're different ages, I would not necessarily advise that. I think you could match two older people together as well as two younger people together, as well as older to younger people too. But I think having some metrics for why two people were matched are pretty important, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. I hadn't thought of the 2x2 thing. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Tom.
Hey, Tom.
How important is top management support, and what metrics do you use to keep that support?
Sorry, do you mind saying that one more time? Did you say top management support?
Yeah, how important is top management support, and what metrics do you use to keep that support?
Yeah, and so by top management support, I'm assuming you mean having executive leadership participate in the employee mentor program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's critical. It's very critical. If you are an executive and you expect your people to participate in the mentor program, but you won't participate in it yourself, it's going to be very difficult to get that buy-in. I mean, ultimately, with that one company where I said, over half their people said they were interested in participating, their leadership, their multiple executive officers participate in the mentor program. And that is so critical, because when your people see your leaders leading and participating in this, and it's like 1 to 2 hours a week, 1 to 2 hours a month. It's not like a massive time commitment, but when they see that your leaders are participating in it, they believe that this is something that they should participate in it as well. And so to ask you in terms of the time commitment and in terms of like how active does leaders have to be in it, they don't have to necessarily manage the system. I mean, if they're working with a program like us or any other mentor program for that matter, it's very little on the management side, but their participation is pretty helpful, because it really it's a confidence thing. It helps unify people together. It helps show them that anyone can learn from this mentoring relationship, because I will definitely say that I have noticed that sometimes there is that curve of like, you know, a chief executive officer, or chief operating officer, or chief financial officer who might initially come in with the mentality of like, I'm happy to be a mentor, but I'm not interested in getting a mentor. Once they can change it and say, hey, I'm interested in learning from another employee, even if they're 27 years old and have only worked at the company for 2 years, I'm open to learning what they have gone through and what their experience is. And they will then in turn, ideally be open to what I have to share as well. But essentially when you can make those relationships happen, they can be really powerful.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Garrett, thank you very much for an absolutely upbeat, sharp presentation. You held together a very difficult audience. You've done better than me, because I can barely control this crowd. So thanks for that. And what you shared was, you know, really something that's important to us, because we certainly believe in mentorship. We have something that we call the 4-way test that we use for elementary students. And we also sponsor spelling bees and teachers who are working really hard to make a difference in their classroom. So mentorship is something that's near and dear to our heart as Rotarians. And so what you shared today goes a very long way. I want to present to you 2 things as a thank you for being our guest today. So the first, I want to let you know that one of the things we do as Rotarians is we're working really hard to eradicate polio around the globe. And so for our guests, those who spend time with us and share, we make a donation to End Polio Now in their name. And so far, we've immunized over 2.5 billion children around the globe in 122 different countries. We're down to just 2 countries now, Afghanistan and Pakistan. But we made a donation in your name for being our guest today. And the second, really nice. Absolutely. And the second is to give you a coin. So this is my personal gift. When I graduated from Ranger School and when I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, they gave us coins. And so this is a Rotary Challenge coin. So on one side, you see the date, February 23rd, 1905, when Rotary International was founded, and our 4-way test on the back. We're going to put that in the mail for you. If we don't see you sooner, we probably won't see you very soon, but we'll put that in the mail for you. So that's our second gift. So be looking for that in the mail sometime soon. Now,
well, I'm really grateful. That's awesome, and I really appreciate that. Really did not need to do that, and I'm honored and I'm grateful that you all would have me here today. This is awesome. I really appreciate all of your questions and interaction and engagement with this. So thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. And by the way, for anybody, if you're interested in chatting with me, I know obviously there's a lot of things that I talked about. I think I gave Jamie my email. If you'd like to reach out and schedule a conversation, I'd be happy to chat, whether it be about, you know, your own company or participating in executive horizontal mentoring, whatever you might be interested in. I'd be happy to chat about that with you and discuss.
Thanks for that, Garrett. And we know we're going to see you soon because that offer is still on the table. After the presentation, I've decided to extend it. Jamie will be in touch. I'll be in touch. All I need from you is a commitment to answer the phone when I call.
You got it. You got it.
Excellent. So for those who've not heard me in my sales mode, that's me in sales mode. Let's give Garrett a hand. Awesome. Before we do our 4-way test, I have to do my imitation of Tom Fisher. I love doing this. It's Tom. Yeah. All right. So of the things that we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it you can come off of mute. Come off of mute. Second,
is it
fair to all friendships?
Third, would it build good friendships? And fourth, would it be beneficial to all concerned? Hey, thank you all very much. It's been an awesome Rotary Zoom meeting.
Michael.
We will see you again next week. You guys have been awesome. Take care of yourselves, drink water, wash your hands, and reach out to a friend.
Michael.
Michael.
Thanks,
All right.
Michael.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, See you, everybody.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, Michael.
You're
Good
welcome.
job, Garrett. That was good.
Thank
I
you.
liked it.
Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you.
Be well.
Great job. Great job. Thank you, Garrett. Look forward to seeing you soon, talking to you soon.
Sounds good.